So we were in this particular section of the 8th chapter. We came into this from the 7th chapter where Krishna ended saying, somebody who always focuses on him, even at the time of death, will surely attain him. And so now the further exploration about the nature of death, how one, if and then a question always comes up. If everything is going to become nothing at the time of death, if we are all going to just become ashes, what is the purpose of doing anything for that matter? And if there are other objectives in life, what is the value of these objectives? How do we consider those objectives here? So Krishna is talking about those aspects in this particular chapter, the 8th chapter here. So I'll quickly give a recap of some key things that we discussed last week and we'll move forward, hopefully completing chapter 8 today. So Krishna gives this very, very famous verse in the 8th chapter here. Antakale cha mameva smaran muktva kalevaram yaprayati samadbhavam yati nastyatra samshayaha. The meaning, the translation is not given in this slide. I can switch between this and the browser, but it will just give a jarring experience. You're able to see the slides here, aren't you?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay, okay.
Yes.
But it's not in the presentation mode, Prabhu.
Yes, I'm intentionally not keeping
Okay.
the presentation mode here. I might decrease this portion. Okay. It's because there are some animations added. I want to avoid certain animations. That's all. And I didn't have time to remove it. Okay. So the meaning of this verse is, Krishna says, whoever at the end of his life quits his body remembering me, anta kale mam eva. Mam is me alone. Eva. The word eva is significant here. He is not talking about me and something else. He's very particular that the focus or the attention should be only on Mam or Krishna. Smaran, think remembering me. Muktva kalevaram. Kalevara is the body. So one who quits muktva, the body, antakale at the time of death, mam eva smaran, remembering me alone or remembering Krishna alone. Yah prayati samadbhavam yati nastyatra samshayah. Such a person, madbhavam, attains my nature. And of this there is no doubt. On this topic, many people will have a question here. Samadbhavam, which means, can we become the same as Krishna? Or the common notion is, do we become one with God? What it means here is, our nature is similar to that of God. And since we are in a state of ignorance, we have forgotten that nature. So the common example is, if you look in families, you just take, for example, even some prominent families, like say a political family, or you even take the family of an actor. The children of the actor also become an actor or an actress. And the same thing is true here. We are all part and parcel or an aspect of the Supreme Lord. Ideally, we will also have a very similar nature as that of the Supreme Lord. There's this whole movement saying, uh, let's not have uh, what you call children of actors becoming actors, children of politicians not becoming a politician. So often it is called as, okay, this is called as a dynastic rule. This person is a dynast. Rahul Gandhi is a dynast, and somebody else is a dynast, etc. So many such things come up. Why people? People in general can talk about it. It is often at what is coming as an envious platform, so to say. It does happen that a child, when who's very much connected to his parents, will take up something about his parents. But if he becomes too privileged, that is an abuse of position. That's a different story. In the same way, we are actually, in one sense, children of God. And I'm saying the word in one sense for a particular reason. The reason being, many religious systems, especially Christianity, say that we are children of God. And the relationship between God and us is God is the Supreme Father and we are his children. This is not necessarily true. The truth is, we can have a relationship with the Supreme Lord as a parent. We can be even his own parent. We can have a relationship with him as his child. We can have a relation, like for example, we had Pradyumna and the great grandchildren as Aniruddha, etc. They had a relationship with Krishna as a son. Vasudeva, the Nanda, Yashoda, Devaki, they had relationship with Krishna as a parent. There were others like Subala, there were Sudama and Madhumangal and others who had a relationship with Krishna as a friend. Some of them can be having a relationship as a wife, like Rukmini, Satyabhama, Kalindi, etc. And some of them can be having a relationship as just a girlfriend too, like Srimati Radharani or Chandravali, Lalita, Vishaka, so many others. So this notion that God is our Father is a very limited notion, and it often appeals to people because they believe that the notion of God as a father means that God is there to take care of me. And that is also a limited understanding of the relationship between the jiva or the living entity and the Supreme Lord. Our relationship with God is not just that he's going to take care of us. Our relationship with God, as we will come very soon, then around 7th verse, and in just 2 more verses from now, is that we are active contributors in a relationship. We are not just passively like children always receiving something from our parents. No, that's not what our scriptures speak about. But in what sense are we like children of God? We are dependent on him at all moments. Our existence is not independent of Krishna. In that sense, we are children of God. If we have that notion, it is right. So Krishna is saying that as much as possible, the focus at the time of death, if it is on the absolute truth, that is where we go to. And this depends on what we do in our life. And that is why we started last week that let us all chant at least 4 rounds of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Right? Now, so we took the examples of Ajamila. We covered that example of Ajamila, what happened to him in our previous session. And then there is also the example of Gajendra, how Gajendra went back to Vaikuntha. So then comes the question, on what basis is the soul awarded the next body? And this 2 verse 2 we covered. Very famous verse from the Bhagavad Gita. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tyajatyante kalevaram tam tam evaiti kaunteya sadatat bhava bhavitaha. It means whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, O son of Kunti, that state he will attain without fail. And we went to various examples about it. We saw these various examples where people pass away quickly, and we saw these examples of how people with various consciousness, what kind of body they do receive in the next birth, right? The one other famous example is that of Maharaj Bharata. I'll come to the timelines a little later during this session itself, hopefully. We are living in India, which is also called as Bharata Varsha. The country Bharata is named after Maharaj Bharata. In the history of mankind, so to say, there were 3 Bharatas. There was one Bharata who was the son of an expansion or an incarnation of the Supreme Lord called Rishabhadeva. And this Bharata appeared around 300 million years ago. It is on his basis, or it is on him, and he was the ruler of entire planet Earth. It is on his name that this country is called Bharata. In addition to it, there are 2 other Bharatas. One is the brother of Lord Ramachandra. Lord Ramachandra appeared around 17 million years ago. And then there is also another Bharata who is the son of Dushyanta and Shakuntala. So we have these 3 famous Bharatas in history. Actually, If you look at it, it's the first Bharata, this Bharata whom we are going to speak about 300 million years ago. His activities are so great that the scriptures have spoken about him, uh, even though he is like 300 million years ago. So the Bhagavatam, where this pastime is narrated, was composed or compiled in one sense about 5,000 years ago. And this was about a history which happened 300 million years ago. So you can see the scale of things here. So Srila Prabhupada, in the purport to text 6, he speaks about King Bharata. Bharata Maharaj was the son of Rishabhadeva, and he had the rulership of the entire planet Earth, not just one country in India or just a part of India like Magadha or what's it, Videha, etc. It's the entire Earth. And there was a time when he felt that he needs to go back to the Supreme Lord. So what should he do? He thought that was the Satya Yuga age of that particular 4 yuga system there. So it so happened that he left everything and he went to the forest. He had a beautiful wife. He had not wives and wonderful children, but he left all of that and he gave his kingdom to his son and he went to the forest. He thought in those days people used to live for an order of around 1 lakh years. So when they used to live for 1 lakh years, they used to be in the kingdom for on the order of around hundreds of years. And then the majority of the life, they wanted to use it in meditation. So meditation was suitable because people lived for around 1 lakh years or so, somewhere, or multiple thousands, so like 50,000, like 10,000 to 1 lakh, somewhere in the range of, in that range, 10,000 to 1 lakh years, people used to live. So the highest was typically 1 lakh, the minimum was 10,000, somewhere in that range people used to live. When he went to the forest, he performed meditation to the extent that he was able to some extent perceive and have loving feelings towards the Supreme Lord. He did that, but he was all alone in the forest. There was nobody else with him. And one day a deer came along and he saw the deer, which was pregnant, walking nearby, and he being doing meditation, he stationed himself near a river so that he could get water easily. It's not like he had to walk for many kilometers to get water. So he saw that this deer, which was pregnant, went to drink some water, and a hunter came from somewhere, killed the deer, and immediately, out of panic, the deer delivered a young fawn or a baby deer onto the water. And being a kind, compassionate person, Bharata took care of the small fawn. And over a period of time, he developed so much attachment to it that he forgot all his daily practices. He used to get up at some time, he used to do meditation for something, then take care of his bodily needs by cooking something or just collecting some roots and fruits, etc. So he had to go and collect some roots and fruits, clean it up, and then offer it to his deity form and then eat it. So, but he used, I mean, there was a designated time. He forgot all his other practices of meditation and he was focusing only on this deer. And one day, while he was walking, he was on a cliff and he fell down from the cliff accidentally. As he was falling down, he thought about the deer. What will happen to this deer? Who is going to feed this deer? Now I am in this pit. Who's going to take care of this deer or this? So he left an entire kingdom to focus on God, but finally he focused on the deer. And the reason I'm bringing this point here is often we think, let me just have enough money in my life, and then I will focus on the Supreme Lord. Uh, we can try, like how Bharat Maharaj, he had enough money with him, everything, and then he said, I have taken care of my family, I've done my best. Now let me focus on real spirituality. But we can be distracted even then. We need the right association and also the right motivation. We need people around us who are going to tell us, hey, you're going on the wrong path. If Bharat Maharaj was not in a forest and instead he was along with others, others could have told him, hey, you're trying to get attached to the Supreme Lord, but you're unduly getting attached to a deer. What are you trying to do here? But if you look at it in a different way, is the picture on the top is that of Markandeya Rishi. Markandeya Rishi was super focused on the Supreme Lord, so much so that he lived for many, many years. And we will come across the scale of time shortly, when there was a time for a cosmic devastation. The whole world was submerged in water, and Markandeya Rishi alone was floating in the water. And he saw the Supreme Lord, Krishna. There's a very famous verse, Karara Vindena Padara Vindam, Mukhara Vinde Viniveshayantam, Vatasya Patrasya Puteshayanam, Balam Mukundam Manasasmarami. Karara Vindena Padara Vindam. Kara means hand. Aravinda, like with his lotus-like hand, Padara Vindam. He took his lotus-like foot. Mukhara Vinde, his lotus-like face. Viniveshayantam. He was smiling with his lotus-like face. Vatasya Patrasya, on a big banyan leaf. Puteshayanam, he's lying down. Balam Mukundam Manasasmarami. Such a young, small Krishna, I remember. This is a famous verse actually composed by Adi Shankaracharya, which captures this pastime of Markandeya Rishi. Markandeya Rishi focused only on the Supreme Lord. He was not in a similar situation as Bharat Maharaj. But for most of us, our current situation in life is mostly like this Bharat Maharaj's case, where our attention, we find it very tough to put our attention on Yam Yam Vapi Smaran Bhavam. Krishna is cautioning us, whatever you put your attention on, that's where you're going to go. And we find it very tough. How do we come out of this? Krishna says in the next verse, verse number 7. And Srila Prabhupada, prior to coming to verse 7, he says, to focus on Krishna, hearing is important. And therefore, for that, practical application is also important. Only then it will be possible to remember the Lord constantly. So, this is something which we discussed last week too. How can we just focus on Krishna if we don't know anything about Krishna? It becomes too dry. And the scriptures have been given. We have so many Puranas, we have so many Itihasas. Why was that given to us? Just to make our journey back to God much more easier. If we say that, no, I am not going to hear all of that stuff, I am not going to read all that stuff, you will find that over a period of time, if we want to focus our mind on Krishna or even chant, it will become very, very, very tough. We need our mind needs a proper matter to say, like how a cow cuts the grass or chews the grass. In a similar way, our mind needs something to act upon. And that are the activities of Krishna and Krishna's devotees given in the sacred literature. If we don't focus our attention on that, then over a period of time, we will not be able to chant. And then without chanting, we cannot even focus our mind on Krishna. That's what's going to happen. So that's another caution that we have to hear. So therefore, Srila Prabhupada writes, if one is transcendently, this is in the purport to text number 6, if one is transcendently absorbed in Krishna's service, then his next body will be transcendental, that is spiritual and not material. Why? There is an exercise we give to our mind by focusing on transcendental literature. Likewise, we need to give an exercise to our body. When the body, the mind, the intelligence, all of them are focused on Krishna's service, then it becomes easy to focus on Krishna. And if you have any questions on this, please keep note it, like in practical life, how to absorb one's mind in Krishna. If you have those questions, we can take it later at the question and answer time. Okay. Now, so coming to the 7th verse, Krishna says, Tasmat sarveshu kaleshu mam anusmara yudhya mayyarpitam mano buddhir mame vaishyasi asamshayah. I'd like to go a little bit on the words in this verse here. Very, very interesting verse. The translation goes this way. Therefore, Arjuna, tasmat, therefore, sarveshu kaleshu. O Arjuna, you should always think of me. Sarveshu kaleshu, mam anusmara. Anusmara means remembering. Smara is remembrance. Anusmara means remember me, follow anu, like for example, those who know Hindi will know the word anuchara, or in those who know Kannada here, anusarisu, they say. Anusarisu means follow somebody else, or anuchara means follow the footsteps or the activities of some great person. Just a moment. Some background noise. So, Krishna is telling Arjuna, therefore, Arjuna should always think of me in the form of Krishna, that I'm here. And at the same time, you have to carry your prescribed duty. With your activities dedicated to me and your mind and intelligence fixed on me, you will attain me without doubt. Mam evaishyasi asamshayaha. Without doubt, asamshayaha, you will mam evaishyasi, you will attain me. How? Mayarpita mano buddhir. By arpita, surrendering one's mind, and buddhihi, one's intellect. And to whom? Mam, unto me. Right? Now, let's go a little bit step by step here. Asamshayaha, without doubt. In our lives, we often have doubts about our own selves. When we are young, we think, am I good enough? Am I intelligent enough? Am I beautiful enough? Am I handsome enough? Etc. There are so many doubts about us. We have a lot of doubts about our own selves. And when we come to spiritual life, we carry forward those very same doubts into our spiritual life too. Oh, Krishna is talking about all of this. Okay, he says, Ma manusmara yudhyacha, ma meveshasi asamshayaha. Maybe he's saying if you follow this, think about Krishna and all that stuff, and also anusmara and yudhya, you have to fight for him, at the same time thinking about him. In my own life, is it really possible? Can I really do it? That's the problem that happens in our life is we restrict ourselves on the basis of the problems we face in life. But what Krishna is encouraging us is know your potential and target your potential. So we should not be limited by our problems. We should be thinking about the potential which Krishna has given and target those potentials. Right? So this asamshayaha is a very important aspect. An equivalent word which is used in the Vedic literature and especially the literature of the Acharyas is nishchayaha. There has to be a determination. I know and I have a confidence that Krishna's words are true and we can go for it. So this is not the confidence like how, say, for example, Donald Trump will say, let's make America great again. That is a confidence coming from the mode of passion. But this asamshayaha is a confidence coming from the mood of dependence. Krishna has said that he will take care. My role is to put forward this effort. Let me do it. It is not about whether I can do, am I good enough, am I a bad person? No. In fact, when we go to the 9th chapter, we will even hear a very famous verse from Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, which says, if a person is dedicated to me, and even if he does the most sinful of all the activities, and he knows that he's doing a sinful activity, but he is unable to control himself, even then that person is considered to be great. Why? Because the source of purification is Krishna. Krishna says, I will purify him in due course of time. He's trying to connect to me. I will give him the strength. It's not all about us. It's about how we connect to Krishna. So this word, asamshayaha, we should understand that let our potentials and not our problems define us. Okay, so I mean, on a very funny note, some of you may follow cricket, and once upon a time, or not once, I think even now, there is this great commentator, Harsha Bogle. He was originally from Hyderabad. He later settled in Mumbai. He's a Marathi speaking person. He settled in Mumbai, and he used to play for all this college cricket, university cricket, etc. He he was good friends of all these Ranji cricket players, because those who play in the college cricket, they finally get into the Ranji cricket tournament. So once it so happened that the Hyderabad team came to Mumbai to play against the Maharashtra team for this Ranji trophy. So he met all his friends the previous day, and he said, they were just talking, and he asked, what do you think about tomorrow's match? And the Hyderabad team said, I mean, they said in their Hyderabadi accent, I don't think I can speak in that accent. Do you realize what we are up to? First, we have to get the first two batsmen out. If the first two batsmen get out, then we get Manjrekar. If you get Manjrekar out, then you will have to face Tendulkar. If then Tendulkar becomes out, then Kambli comes in. And if Kambli gets in, there's one more guy called Pandit. That fellow has to come in. Now, by the time you get all of these people out, you have to get 7 people out. What are you talking about? And sure enough, it so happened that when Mumbai team came to bat, they hit something like 750 runs in that match, because the people from the Hyderabad team never thought they are going to win. They only thought that they're going to, how many runs are we going to give them? That is all they had thought, and that is all was happening. And the matter was so worse that when one of the bowler was bowling to Manjrekar, the fielder did not even bother about picking the ball. And when the bowler asked him, hey, why are you not even picking up the ball? He said, you have given 700 runs altogether. What does it matter another 4? So this kind of attitude comes in our own life. I have tried so much, nothing worked so far. I don't think anything else will also work. This is a material or a mundane attitude which Krishna doesn't want us to have. Asamshayaha. Please do not have doubt in your potential, or I shouldn't have doubt in my potential. Krishna is saying you can go all the way there. Okay? That's one thing here. The second thing is Mam Anusmara Yudhyacha, the one which is highlighted in bold. Krishna is telling Anusmara, you meditate on me, Yudhya, and fight Cha. Both of them you do. We often think Anusmara or meditation is the opposite of action. Meditation and action cannot happen together. One has to sit in one isolated place and do meditation. But what Krishna is asking Arjuna is not meditation, it is smara, it is remember. Remembrance does not need closing of one's eyes. I can remember an objective and work for something. I can remember a person and dedicate my action to that person. That is what Krishna is asking Arjuna to do. And that's what is the key for spiritual success in our own lives. Remembrance is not like antithetical to action. Remembrance and action can happen. In fact, to the extent one remembers the purpose, to that extent one will be more effective in action. So therefore, Krishna, especially for our Kali Yuga and all times, he is not talking about the path of meditation, which people like Bharat Maharaj did. We saw the problem with that kind of meditation. And even today, we find a lots of so-called gurus who say, take this mantra and just close your eyes and do meditation. You will see that the tips of your body, you'll see some tingling sensation, and then neglect it, go further, go deeper, etc. Is that what Krishna has asked us to do? No. Krishna is saying, Yudhyacha. Krishna is saying, fight. Do some practical action for me. How? Mayyar Pita Mano Buddhir. So, Arpita, he wants us to give our mind, mana, and buddhi, intelligence. The function of the mind is feelings. Do I like it? Do I not like it? The function of buddhi is this the right thing to be done or is this not the right thing to be done? So both uh, right wrong aspect, which is coming from buddhi, as well as our perceptual feelings, both have to be directed to Krishna. And how can I just direct it to Krishna if I don't know anything about Krishna? That is why we need to study scriptures. And the ideal system is right from childhood, a person studies scriptures to know what are Krishna's likes and dislikes, what are the ways in which one focuses on Krishna. That is crucial. And so Krishna continues this in the next verse. Abhyasa yoga yuktena chetasa nanyagamina paramam purusham divyam yati partha anuchintayam. This verse means, he who meditates on me as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, his mind constantly engaged in remembering me, undeviated from the path, he, O Partha, is sure to reach me. Right? So the question that comes here is, Abhyasa yoga yuktena. One has to practice it multiple times. And here, the translation that I mentioned is, he who meditates on me. Just a previous verse ago, up in this previous verse, in the 7th verse, I just said, Mam Anusmara, don't just think of meditation. You have to remember and fight. And now, the translation just talked about meditation. Hey, aren't you contradicting yourself? You may ask me. The question may come. And why is Srila Prabhupada talking about it that way? The reason is, this particular section of the Bhagavad Gita is meant for a yogi to come to the stage of bhakti. There are people who are attached to having the experience that one has by focusing one's mind on the Supreme Lord in the mood of meditation. But Krishna is a person who doesn't uh, whip things up suddenly. He gradually builds it up. That is his nature. And he allows people of different natures to uh, approach him, and yet he gives them a leeway. He says, yes, you can follow for some time, but note that this is what has to be done finally. So therefore, the key aspect here is that this abhyasa yoga, one has to remember Krishna by practice. The practice, this notion of abhyasa or practice is common both to the bhakti yogi as well as to the jnana yogi about whom this is being spoken about. It's common. This practice makes a man perfect is common in both places. So, Srila Prabhupada, to clarify this, he says, the Lord does not say that one should give up his prescribed duties or engagements. One can continue them and at the same time think of Krishna by chanting Hare Krishna. This will free one from material contamination and engage the mind and intelligence in Krishna. By chanting Krishna's names, one will be transferred to the supreme planet Krishna Loka without a doubt. Now comes the method. Verse number 9 onwards. So what is this method for remembering Krishna? This is for this Yoga Mishra Bhakti. This is not the pure Bhakti. Right? We talked about verse number 8, where Krishna is talking about this particular yogi who needs it. And why Krishna is talking about it? Because in the end of the 7th chapter, Krishna was talking about a person who is in this mixed bhakti. He also spoke about the pure bhakti and the mixed bhakta. And Arjuna asked a question about the different terms associated with the mixed bhakta. And so now we are going to continue about this verse from 9 to 13 about this mixed bhakta who has, hey, I like this. There is this Jnana Mishra Bhakta is a person who says, I want to focus on the absolute and I want to possibly feel that sense of Sat. Sat is that eternal feeling that there is no limitation on existence for me. I always exist. He wants to have that kind of experience, and that's why he approaches the Supreme Lord. So, how will he see? What are the different ways of seeing the Supreme Lord? Kavim Puranam Anushasitaram Anor aniyamsham anusmaredyah sarvasya dhataram achintya rupam aditya varnam tamasah parastat. I don't know how many of you read or you have been to some functions where Vedic verses are recited. One of the verses from the Vedas is Aditya Varnam Tamasastu Pare. And Krishna is speaking a very similar phrase even in the Bhagavad Gita. That's why Gita is called Gita Upanishad. It is a summary of all the Upanishads. You find many statements from other Upanishads in the Gita, actually. And this Aditya Varnam Tamasah Parastat is actually from that Vedic statement, Aditya Varnam Tamasastu Pare. Okay. So, in this way, in this verse number 9, Krishna is saying one can meditate upon the Supreme Person as Kavim Puranam. Kavim. Kavi is a poet. It also means a very thoughtful person. And a thoughtful person can know everything. So Krishna is a person who knows everything. Purana, he is the oldest of all. Anushasitaram, he is a controller. And then it is Anor Aniyam, he is smaller than an atom. He is very small. Okay. Sarvasya Dhataram, he is the maintainer of everything. Achintya Rupam, his form is inconceivable. Aditya Varnam Tamasah Parastat. Aditya Varnam, he is as luminous as the sun. And is Tamasah Parastat. Tamasa is darkness. This world, material world, is considered to be dark because we lack the light of going back to Godhead. We lack the light of the presence of God in our life. We lack the perception of the presence of God in our lives. Tamasa Parastat. Para means beyond this darkness. What is there beyond the darkness? There is the world of light, or the world of, which is that world of light means the world is illuminated by the bodily effulgence of the Supreme Lord. Okay. So he's present eternally in his abode. This is the way in which a Jnana Mishra Bhakta can do. And then in the previous verse, in the 6th chapter, Krishna had already spoken about how one should focus, and even in the 7th chapter, one should focus his mind upon the region between the eyebrows. Such a practice is called the Shat Chakra Yoga practice. So Krishna says to practice, if you are interested in practicing that, Prayanakale manasachalena bhaktya yukto yoga balena chaiva Bhruvor madhye pranam avesha samyak satam param purusham upaiti divyam. The meaning is one who at the time of death fixes his life between the eyebrows. Okay, that was already said. And by the strength of yoga, what else should he do? Undeviating mind. Right? So the Bhruvor madhye, between the eyebrows, Bhruvor madhye, pranam avesha samyak. The life air has to be fixed completely, right? And then he says, you have, with an undeviating mind, he has to engage completely in Param Purusham Upaiti Divyam. Param Purusham, he has to focus on the Supreme Lord. Upaiti Divyam, he achieves the eternal abode. Okay. Now, what is this Shat Chakra Yoga here? So there are different chakras within the body, which is called the one at the bottommost at the genitals, or below the genitals in one sense, is the Mooladhara chakra. And then we have the Swadhisthana chakra, the one at the navel is the Nabhi chakra, the one at the heart is the Anahata chakra, one at the throat is Vishuddhi chakra, then there is the Agnya chakra between the forehead, and then there's the Sahasrara chakra at the head. So the requirement to follow this is given. So can anybody do this yoga where you focus on the mind, etc.? Krishna gives a requirement in verse number 11. He says, Yadaksharam Veda Vido Vadanti Vishanti Yad Yatayo Vitaragaha Yad Yadichanto Brahmacharyam Charanti Tatte Padam Sangrahena Pravakshye. So he says the qualifications in that verse that he says are, number one, they should be Aksharam Veda Vido Vadanti Vitaragaha Brahmacharyam Charanti. Brahmacharyam Charanti. That person should be a celibate. He cannot be having a sexual life and still follow this. That is not possible. Then, secondly, there is this word Vitaraga, which also Krishna spoke in the 4th chapter. Vitaraga Bhaya Krodho. He spoke about it in the 4th chapter. One is physically abstaining from having sexual contact with others. He should also be Vitaragaha. He should not even have the desire to enjoy the opposite sex and the desire to enjoy the objects of this material world. Right? So that is another qualification that such a person is required to have. Third is Veda Vidha Vadanti. He should be very conversant with the Vedas. And second is Aksharam. He should focus on the word Om. This is the process for the Yoga Mishra Bhakti that Krishna is talking about. And the result of that is Vishanti Satte Padam. That he will achieve the final salvation as such. Sayati Paramam Gatim. He'll achieve the Sayati Param, the ultimate abode, he will get it. That's what verse number 11, 12, and 13 will talk about. But verse number 14, after speaking on all of this, Krishna says in verse number 14, Ananyacheta satatam yomam smarati nityashah tasyaham sulabah partha nityayuktasya yoginah. Translation: for one who remembers me without deviation, I am easy to obtain, O son of Pritha, because of his constant engagement in devotional service. So Krishna gave this Jnana Mishra Bhakti. Now he is talking about Ananya. Ananya means alone. There is the focus is only on Krishna. It is not on the different yogic process. It is not focusing on the motion of the life as prana, apana, vyana, udana, samana within the body. There is no Kundalini chakra involved. There is no Omkara involved. He is just saying Sulabha. There is a much easier path. And that path is Ananya Chetaha. For one's remembrance is only on Krishna. Why? By engaging in devotional service. How? That was the verse number 7 that we discussed, where one has to remember and work for Krishna. That's the point he was talking about. Now, let's see what happens with this Kevala Bhakti. If one does this Kevala Bhakti, Mam upete punarjanma dukkhalayam ashashvatam napnuvanti mahatmanah samsiddhim paramam gataha. This verse says, after attaining me, these great souls, Mahatmas, who are yogis in devotion, these bhakti yogis, right? They never return to this temporary world. And this is what Krishna is talking about in the next few verses. This temporary word is dukkhalayam and ashashvatam. It is a place of dukkha and it is very, very temporary. Now, when anybody ever speaks about this verse here, like say you are all trying to practice devotional service. Think about yourself 5 years ago or 10 years ago. If somebody were to tell you, this world is a miserable place, it's temporary, just let's get out of this place. In one sense, you would say, hey, you are a loser. You don't know how to survive. You don't know how to thrive. You are just speaking all bullshit. In one sense, we are actually what we call as shooting the messenger. If you analyze carefully, for all of us, there is birth, there is death, there is old age, and there is disease. There is no way that we can, there is no way that we can avoid these 4 items: birth, death, old age, and disease. Most of you are young here, but there will come a time for old age where the body parts stop functioning, where even getting up, sitting down, All of these things have to be done with a lot of effort. And that is what makes it dukkha. That a person who feels, I have a desire to walk, go, get something, and do something, is inhibited by his body. That is the nature of this world here. And somebody who's thinking, hey, it's okay, let me just focus on my current work, he will again get another birth. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam. He will get another body in which he will again come back and he will experience the very same thing. And therefore, it is only those who focus on Krishna that I am not wanting this world here, that person can go back to the spiritual world. Having said that, for a Bhakti Yogi, if you recollect, I think it was last week or a few weeks ago, I had said, it is not that we are motivated to escape from this material world. That is not our motivation at all. This is just a reality check that we should, it is not that this world is a suitable place to stay. Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur often said, this world is like a toilet. Nobody stays in the toilet for long. They do their job and then get out of the toilet. That's it. So that's the way we treat this world. And in contrast to it, we have so many people who say, let me build a massive metro rail system. Let us have India becoming the best economic superpower in the world. All such people are illusioned. You, we get to live for some 50 years, 60 years, 80 years, max 100, 120 years. In that, let us see what is the one which will be useful for us, not just in this birth, but across multiple births. Instead of that, just building a bridge or, having economic prosperity is not going to solve the problem. There were prosperous kingdoms, prosperous countries and towns before the current civilization that were present. They faded into oblivion and another city, another country became great. This cycle will continue forever. Something will be at the top for some time, something it will go down a little while later. That's the nature of this world. That's not where we put our focus and attention on. So what we discussed a few weeks ago is a devotee is interested to follow other devotees, other great devotees. And these other great devotees are always engaged in the service of Krishna in some position, in some loka, either in Krishna loka or in the material world. And our objective is, if we remember Krishna, we get to serve them. And that's a position of happiness. You need to start serving devotees to realize the value and the real happiness involved in it. Okay. Now, if we don't do that, what happens? We come back to this material world. And what is this material world like? Let's go to the next verse. For paucity of time, I'll skip the pastime of Dhruva. Krishna says in verse 16, Brahma bhuvana lokaha punaravartino Arjuna mamupetya tu kaunteya punarjanmana vidyate. He says, if in this world we saw that there is a Brahma loka, that's like we are in Bhuloka, above us is Bhuvar loka, Mahar loka, Jana loka, Tapa loka, Satya loka. And that Satya loka is the abode of Lord Brahma. Whether you go to Brahma loka or you go to the bottommost planet, everywhere there is a rebirth. So Krishna says, with Brahma Bhuvana Loka Punaravartino Arjuna. From the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, all are places of misery wherein repeated birth and death take place. But one who attains to my abode, Mam Upetya tu Kaunteya Punarjanmana Vidyate, he does not need to take birth again. Hey, you will, if you have been carefully noting what I said just in the previous verse, the person will go to Goloka, or he will be having the association of other devotees in his next life, which means he's again coming back to this material world. Then how is Krishna's word being true here? How is the Supreme Lord's word being true? And the answer here is, Mam Upetya tu Kaunteya. Upetya, arriving unto him. For a sage, wherever he is present, be it the material world or the spiritual world. For a fully realized person, it doesn't matter because he is able to connect his Atma to the Supreme Lord everywhere. And therefore, out of compassion for the living entities, these liberated souls come to planet Earth just so that others get benefited. Uh, we have a very, I heard this very nice example last week, not last week, yesterday, from one of the participants in this group here. It touched me very much. There was a king, Parikshit Maharaj, who was the grandson of Maharaj Yudhishthira, or the grandson in particular of Arjuna. After uh, Arjuna and all the rest of the Pandavas, they left the kingdom because they realized that Krishna had left the planet. There is no more value for them here. They didn't value this world here. They gave the kingdom to Parikshit Maharaj, and then they departed. So that's a wholly different pastime altogether. Parikshit Maharaj ruled earth very nicely, and he was very conscientious of his activities as a king, and he was called Parikshit because when he was in the womb of his mother, there was a Brahmastra that was directed towards him, and Krishna personally came inside the womb of his mother and protected him from the Brahmastra. And as a young child, I mean, boy who was not even born as yet, he saw this effulgent form of Krishna coming inside his mother's womb and fighting the Brahmastra and negating it. And so when he came out, he was constantly questioning, is this that same person who is there? So he's called Parikshit. He asked a lot of questions. And he'll rule the kingdom for some time. And due to some reasons, he was cursed to die in 7 days. And he accepted it. And Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport to when this incident happened, he writes in the purport that when Parikshit Maharaj was the king, he was a devotee, but he was also very intently focused on governance and administration, etc. So at that time, he didn't get as much association of great devotees. But the moment he said, done with it, I'm going to die in 7 days, I can counteract it, but I will accept it. Now, let me focus on what is ultimately of benefit for my soul, and that for the soul of all of the praja. At that time, Shukadeva Goswami, the son of Vyasa, who was already on the liberated platform, even at the time of birth, that person came to meet him. To the extent we really want to have devotional service, to that extent, Krishna will send those right set of people for us. It all depends on our desire. And if we don't want it, this rebirth from one planet to the other planet will continue to exist. We born, we are die, we are healthy for some time, we are hurrying to get work done, we just we get some sense gratification temporarily, and then we die. All these things continue to happen. And you might say, hey, it's okay, just let me do it for a few days. I want to enjoy this for a little while. Now, so we need to know the scale of time. If you're going from this loka to that loka, how long can we be in each of these lokas? So Krishna says, Sahasra Yuga Paryantam Ahar Yad Brahmano Viduhu Ratrin Yuga Sahasrantam Te Ahoratra Vido Janaha. Sahasra Yuga Paryantam. 1,000 ages taken together form the duration of Brahma's one day. And similar is the duration of one's night. So just for you to know the scale of time here. Kali Yuga spans 432,000 years. We are in Kali Yuga right now. Dwapar Yuga is 2 times Kali Yuga, that is 864,000 years. Treta Yuga is 3 times Kali Yuga, and that is around 12,096,000 years. Satya Yuga is 4 times Kali Yuga. So if you add all of this, that becomes a Mahayuga or a Divya Yuga or 1 Yuga cycle. That means 10 times, so 4 times plus 3 times plus 2 times plus 1 time. That becomes 10 times of it is the duration of 1 Chatur Yuga cycle. That will become 1 Chatur Yuga cycle is 4,320,000 years. Now, there is a Manu who will rule each of these, a series of such Mahayugas. Each Manu rules for 71 such Mahayugas. So Then after this Manu, within the day of Brahma, there are 14 such Manus. So therefore, if you look at it, Brahma's one day is equal to 4.32 billion human years. And his night is also that 4.32 billion human years. And his day has 360 such days, and one life of his has such 100 such years, totally 311 trillion human years. What's the point of talking about this? If we are not careful about this, we will be here. We are right now, this is the 50th year of Lord Brahma, which means he has a lifetime of approximately 150 trillion human years. So if we are not focused, we can just spend another 150 trillion years going from one loka to another loka within this the set of lokas administered by Lord Brahma. So much freedom we have. Krishna has given the freedom. It's for us to choose. We may have a lifespan of another 50 to 100 years max. And within that, we can choose. Do I want to keep going from one loka to the other from the next 150 trillion years? Or let us focus on what is really essential. So it's important to know that there has to be a sense of urgency and sense of purpose in our lives. That's why Krishna is talking about these verses here in this 8th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. And then he continues this very famous verse 8, verse 18, 19, and 20, where Krishna talks about that at the beginning of the day of Brahma, all the entities, they become manifest from the unmanifest state. So, and then when the night falls, again, they go into the unmanifest state, which is at the beginning of a day of Brahma, all the souls are there in a state like a coma state. They are within the body of Mahavishnu. Now, Mahavishnu gives these souls to Lord Brahma, and then he brings these souls and gives a body to them. So Lord Brahma is the engineer who takes the soul. The soul is the input for him, and the output is the soul with the body, and also the soul with the body in this material world. So an engineer always works with ingredients. He cannot work with nothing. There has to be an input. There is a black box or a white box which he makes changes, and then there is a final output. That's Lord Brahma's role. So at the beginning of each day, he gives a body to the soul. At the end of the day, the body goes off. And again, at the end of his life, all these bodies are gone. They just remain as souls. Again, the next Brahma has to come. These 311 trillion years repeat again. And we have been already through many such Brahmas lifetimes. Not one or two Brahmas, many, many, many. Multiplied by a factor of 311 trillion years. To that extent, we have been experiencing the happiness, the miseries, the relationships, and yet not feeling satisfied. That is where we are. So in verse 20, Krishna says, hey, you have been going for 311 trillion multiplied by some number here and there. And then he says, he's giving a teaser. This verse is not given here, but I like that verse. I'll just recite it. Parastasmatu bhavonyo avyakto avyaktat sanatanaha yasa sarveshu bhuteshu nashyatsu na vinashyati. There is another world, which is the spiritual world, which is eternal. And it is transcendental to this, this manifest, unmanifest. Sometimes you get bodies manifested, sometimes it is not. Sometimes the world is present, sometimes it is not. There is another unmanifest nature. It is supreme and it is never annihilated. When everything in this world is annihilated, that part remains as it is. That spiritual word of Krishna is Avyakto Akshareti Uktas Tam Ahu Paramam Gatim Yam Prapya Na Nivartante Tadhama Paramam Mama. So whatever is that final, it's called unmanifest because it is not visible to our eyes. You cannot smell it through our current ears. It is accessible only on the platform of the soul. It's a different dimension altogether. So in this verse 21, Krishna says, the people from the Vedanta, they may call it as an unmanifest world here. So that which was described as eternal and unmanifest, that is called Paramam Gatim. That is the supreme goal. Those who attain that eternal form of the Supreme Lord there, which is whoever goes to that world will attain a form similar to the Supreme Lord. Tad Dhama Paramam Mama. That world is mine. Right? So many times, Yat Gatva Na Nivartante Tad Dhama Paramam Mama. Yam Prapya Na Nivartante Tad Dhama Paramam Mama. Krishna is emphasizing his Dhama, his abode. And there are so many people in this world who think, no, there is nothing like abode or anything. It's just we all become one with the absolute truth. If there is becoming one is present, then why will this Dhamma word come into picture? It wouldn't come. Second, the word Dhamma is very, very critical and important. On the left, you see this picture of Krishna with Balaram. Many of you know that Krishna stayed with his foster parents, Nanda Maharaj and Yashoda, until he reached the age of 12. After he reached the age of 12, he went to Mathura, and the people in Vrindavan were very much aggrieved that Krishna was leaving. And when Krishna was leaving, they were feeling very sad. So what they could have done is they could have also gone along with him to Mathura, and they could have gone along with him from Mathura to Dwaraka. If they really liked him so much, they could have done that, right? But they didn't do that. They stayed in Vrindavan itself. Why? And this is the heart of Krishna, which Krishna is speaking about. Tad Dhama Paramamama. Point number 1. When Krishna appears, he brings his spiritual world with him to the material world, which means the Bhauma Vrindavana, or the Vrindavan, which is in the Uttar Pradesh, state within the district of Mathura, is not different from the Vrindavan in the spiritual world. So Krishna has empowered that Dhamma as it is. It is this because his Dhamma is never destroyed. So when he brings his Dhamma here, even in earth, we get that same Dhamma. Secondly, the residents of Vraja are more attached even to the Dhamma than they are to Krishna. Why? Because Krishna has said so many places in the Bhagavad Gita, right? Yad gatva na nivartante tad dhama paramam mama. Yam prapya na nivartante tad dhama paramam mama. When you're attached to a person, it is a very immature way in which you just keep running behind the person. But a higher sense of maturity is whatever that person is attached to, we also get attached to that person. So Krishna is attached to this holy Dhamma. There is a particular mood in the Vrajadham. He is very attached to it. And therefore, the residents of Vrindavan, they did not leave Vraja. They knew that because Krishna's heart is in this Dhamma, we will be able to get association of Krishna even in this Dhamma. There is a particular mood in Vrajadham. And he is inviting us to that particular Vrajadham. Tad Dhama Paramam Mama. And how to attain this? Purushasa Parapartha Bhaktya Labhyastu Ananyaya Yasyantasthani Bhutani Yena Sarvam Idam Tatam. Krishna says, this Bhaktya, you can achieve this fine abode only by Bhakti, by this Bhakti. Ananya Bhakti, which is not focused on anything else, no other Devata, no other objective of life, no becoming Prime Minister, CEO, CXO, nothing. No becoming greatest mom, greatest dad, nothing. Only objective is how to glorify Krishna and Krishna's devotees. That is Bhakti. And by doing so, one attains this eternal abode. And finally, Krishna further states about what is the different paths. If you don't go by Bhakti, there are other paths by which what is the path, what will happen to a person. So if you take, for example, a Jnani, whom we discussed in the beginning of this verse, he goes through what is called as a Devayana. And what is it? When a yogi leaves his body, his soul is first taken by the deity of light. Then it is taken by the deity of the day. Then by the Shukla Paksha. Then by the deity of the first 6 months. There is a deity associated with this Shukla Paksha, then the deity of the year, and then that of the air, sun, moon, lightning, water, Indra, Brahma, and finally, one associate of the Lord takes him from Lord Brahma's Loka to Brahman. This is what happens to a jnani. But if suppose one is not a jnani and one is a regular person like who I am, a karmi, what happens? That person on leaving the body is guided by the smoke, the deity of the night. One by one, he goes to Pitraloka. And from Pitraloka, if he gets sufficient credits, like some people do the Shraddha ceremony every month, every year, etc. These Shraddha ceremonies, this is for a person if a person is too attached to what happens in this world, like most of us, then their destination is Pitraloka. For some time they'll be in Pitraloka. They will get the food in Pitraloka from whatever offerings is given on earth by their uh, descendants. And after getting the birth for some time, after staying for some time in Pitraloka, they go to Chandraloka, they exhaust their pious credits and they return to earth. But is this required? But so what Krishna is saying is, hey, there are those two paths. One was for the jnani, one for the extremely attached person. But I am asking you to do ananya bhakti, kevala bhakti. He says, this is not for you. And therefore Krishna says, Naite Shruti Partha Janan Yogi Mukhyati Kashana Tasma Sarveshu Kaleshu Yoga Yukto Bhavarjuna. Krishna says, although the devotees know these two paths, O Arjuna, they are never bewildered. Therefore, be fixed in devotion. He says, Vedeshu Yagneshu Tapaschaiva Daneshu Yat Punya Phalam Pradishtam Atyeti Tat Sarvam Idam Viditva Yogi Param Sthanam Upaiti Chadyam. This is the last verse of this chapter. A person who accepts the path of devotional service is not bereft of the results from the studying of the Vedas, performing Vedeshu Yagneshu, performing sacrifices, yagneshu tapassu, then dhaneshu, doing charities or pursuing other philosophical activities. Simply by devotional service, he attains there, which means a devotee does not go through this Pitriyana part, nor does he go through this Devayana part. Like we saw this example, which I didn't go through. We have this quick case of Dhruva Maharaj. The the Vishnu Dutas from Vaikuntha came to him in a chariot and took him in a chariot. There was no need of all the different deities. If our focus is not on Krishna, then all these other things come into picture. If not, if our focus is on Krishna, then directly Krishna will come and take us to his different lokas. His lokas means the Vaikuntha lokas. It could be the loka of Narasimha or Vamana or Krishna loka itself. A long time. So 8:10 to 9:20, 1 hour, 10 minutes. Any comments? Any questions? Oh, just before you say. So when Dhruva went to Vaikuntha, he didn't go alone. He felt that his mother gave him the right instructions at the right time. And he asked the Vishnudutas, can my mother come along too? And they said, yes. She has already earned a life for her in Vaikuntha because she instructed you to be a nice devotee. So if you and I help this generation of folks in becoming nice devotees, somebody else may go to the Supreme Abode, and by their help, we can also go there. Okay, I'll pause here. Please, you can say your comments. Any questions?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Yes, Prabhu, please tell me.
Prabhu, I have couple of questions.
Yes.
One is from slide number 45, where you mentioned,
Okay, let's go to 45.
You mentioned that it's only bhakti is the only way that is glorifying Krishna and his devotees. And also you mentioned that not being a great parent or something on that terms. So how do we understand this? Because usually, what I have seen, or even that could be my tendency, is to when it is for a devotee, we respect the devotee. When it is the dham where we are, we try to focus, or I try to focus as much of attention what I can do to the best. But then when back to the normal state of life, It is
Hmm.
like finding faults or
Hmm.
not able to appreciate others,
Hmm.
be it at workplace, be it at home.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
how is it like we have to maintain that, because these are the two things, right? Nature and the habit. It's the
Hmm.
nature of a person is to do something, and
Hmm.
habit is something which can be cultivated. So how is that I could bring in a change in my nature or something? So on that term, I wanted to understand something.
Okay. So, two things here. Number one, let's take your example that you quote. You are, we may be in the mood of finding faults with others. Um, Maybe somebody in the office, he's playing some games with you so that you'll be shown in bad light, and he'll be shown in good light. So you, well, there are two ways in which the mind can work on. He's so bad, he's doing this, he doesn't have any sense of right principles in life, he's a totally unprincipled person. uh, he's or I did so much for him and yet he is not able to reciprocate anything for me. All these thoughts come about here, and these thoughts will come about only when we do not have we are not, what you call, spending enough time in the positive things. If we spend time only on these things and we don't have our positive reinforcements, the mind will automatically go in that direction. Let me take an extreme example. This is not true for the case that you're saying, but it's a little extreme example. We have a small child, and the child will go to his or her mother and ask her mother, give me a cookie or give me something. And the mother will say, no, you already ate enough. You will have indigestion. I will not give you now. Then the child gets angry and the child will hit the mother. Will the mother be angry at the child? Oh, he is hitting me. The mother knows, okay, this is what children do. This is the nature of of a child, and the child cannot control himself or herself. But how does the mother know about it? She knows about it by observing the child, of course, and she also knows about it by hearing from others. The elders in her family will tell, children are like this. This is a phase in life. They will get over it. When they become bigger, they will also understand what they are doing. So both by hearing about the children as well as from practical experience, the mother doesn't get angry with the child, although the child is, in one sense, harming the mother. Likewise, when we spend enough time in daily hearing about Krishna, then we will be less affected by what others do. We will not be thinking in terms of their faults, but we'll be thinking in terms of, can I help him? Or maybe I too have it. It's okay. Let me pray to the Supreme Lord that the other person is not affected. Then there is a second part. The second part is, uh, in one sense, an opposite of the first part. In the first part, it was how I can help the other person based on the strength from hearing. Quite often, it puts us in a very superior position. I am right, that person is wrong, and therefore, mentally at least, and maybe even with my actions, what can I do to make him be better? And we have to be realistic. We all are not perfect persons. There could be something right in what the others are doing to us. Where there is smoke, most likely there is fire. Maybe there is something wrong in which I am doing. And therefore, we can have a conversation either directly with him or express our current situation to a devotee and say, hey, what can I do to be better? And the devotee will then help us, saying from scriptures or from other experience, this is how you can do something better. When we get into this kind of an exercise, it so happens that we become closer to the devotee. And when we become closer to a devotee, it removes the pain and the anguish that we get from others. And our mind will not focus on them. Instead, we will focus on, hey, it is so nice that he gave this perspective. And he connected me to Krishna through this method here. That is more important. That is very helpful for us. So one is treating it as an opportunity for our own improvement. This is the second thing I said. And the second is is an understanding that this is the nature of this world. It is dukkhalayam ashashvatam, as we heard from what Krishna said. To expect anything else from this world is a misery. It's like we are having too great expectations. This novel by Charles Dickens also, Great Expectations. So an intelligent man doesn't have great expectations from this world. I mean, forget you or me, even great sages often are have this kind of a problem where others don't understand them well. It's a feature of this world. Will it be lost? No. If even if you go back to the spiritual world, what happens there is there are devotees who, some set of devotees want to serve Krishna in one way, another set want to serve Krishna in another way. There will always be differences in perceptions between two people. But the difference between the spiritual world and the material world is, in the material world, the difference in perception is there so that I become happy at any cost. In the spiritual world, the difference in perception is how can I make Krishna happy? And since Krishna is the unifying force, actually everybody is happy with each other. You know, it is like there in the spiritual world, it is healthy competition. Here it is an unhealthy competition. That is all to it. So negating it is not a solution. Accepting it for what it is a proper solution. And embracing the fact that in future there are going to be more differences. Let me be ready for it, that there is going to be a vibrant spiritual world which I will have access to, where everybody wants to serve Krishna in different ways. And let me be happy in observing how others serve Krishna and seeing Krishna becoming happy. And then the devotees in turn becoming happy. That is our true happiness. Not knowing it, we focus everything on our own selves. That's the problem, Gaurav Prabhu.
Okay.
Okay.
Sure.
Not satisfied? There may be something else that I missed. Please let me know.
No, Prabhu. I get the essence of what you just spoke.
Any other thoughts, comments? Harsha Prabhu, you have anything to say? Any
Yeah,
comment?
one question, Prabhu. As in the sense, like, see, we did come to this world because of our own desires in the
Yes,
first place, right?
correct.
So now, just a question that I had was: is this path only once? Now, with
Hmm.
all this, we go back to Krishna
Hmm.
Loka, and eventually that will take a long time
Ah.
from the
Hmm.
position that we are in, obviously.
Correct.
But if we go back, is we always talk about path of no return, and
Yes.
that thing that's written here, right? Like,
Yes.
so is it true that we'll come only once, and once we go back,
Uh-huh.
we'll definitely not return, or will it ever come back to a point that
Yes.
sometime later I might have a desire later again I'll come back?
Yeah.
That, that
Yes. So this is a very fundamental question. Nice that you asked, Harsha Prabhu. Many folks ask this question. Srila Prabhupada himself has answered this question also. Uh, you so this yad gat we to so many times we heard here, right, today, yad gatva nani vartante tad dhama paramam mama, yad labdhva nani vartante tad dhama paramam mama, right? Where was that verse here? Let me go back. Ha, yam prapya nani vartante tad dhama paramam mama. So based on this, the understanding is typically you will come to a conclusion that number one, it is only one time. Somehow we came here, we don't know how we came, but having gone, we will never come back. If this is true, it is contradictory to another principle that the jivas have finite independence. With the finite independence, can the jiva not desire to not serve Krishna also? Yes, the jiva can have. So, Srila Prabhupada explained this as that having experienced this dukkhalayam ashashvatam of this world, a jiva becomes fully cognizant of it to such an extent that usually and mostly, for large percentage of the time, the jiva never comes back to this material world in a conditioned state, usually. But yet, if Krishna has to give freedom to everybody, they have always have the freedom to choose him or not to choose him. So in that theoretical sense, yes, jivas can come back. But there is another way in which the jivas actually come back. A perfected soul is so sad to see that the Supreme Lord is actually sad at all these living entities struggling in this world. So, on behalf of the Supreme Lord, many of these Vaikuntavasis personally come to this different planetary systems so that they can liberate them. They can give the association of the Supreme Lord to them. So they are coming for a purpose. It is they are still connected to the Supreme Lord, and they are not conditioned. That is what the great acharyas like Ramanujacharya, Madhvacharya, Srila Prabhupada, the followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu like Sanatana Goswami, Rupa Goswami, they all came to give us a guiding light to go back. So their coming back is different. And I know that you are not talking about such Mahatmas. You are talking about people like us. So usually the experience is so bad for us here that we will never wish to be separated from Krishna. But yes, given the notion that the Jiva has independence, the Jiva can come. So you may be telling, hey, you are giving me this could be possible, that could also be possible. So there's a very nice verse which was written by Vedanta Desikacharya. I think I told you once. Vedanta Desikacharya wrote this verse in which he says, the face of the Supreme Lord is like a moon, and his crown is like a blazing sun. And in between his crown and his face are the black hair. They are like the night. So if the moon has to shine, it cannot shine when the sun is present. It needs some darkness to be present. And that darkness is the black hair which of Krishna. So in one view of Krishna, we see the sun, we see the moon, and we see the night. Do we see the sun, moon, and the night always? No. We either see the sun or the moon in the night. This or that. So Vedanta Desikacharya says, the Supreme Lord is the abode of, is that person in whom all contradictions are resolved. This and that both exist in the Supreme Lord. In the same way, freedom for the living entities as well as a strong desire not to go back to the material world. Both he provides, the Supreme Lord provides. That's how he's the abode of all contradictions. And that's why we see, we will go to the Bhagavatam after the Bhagavad Gita, where we'll go step by step. We see that the structure of the Bhagavatam is such that in the beginning, you see unidimensional aspects. That Lord does this only. The devotees do this only. And as we go from the first canto to the ninth canto or the 10th canto, the Supreme Lord behaves in two ways, this way and that way, this way and that way. So at an evolved state, we can live with contradictions. In our preliminary stages of faith, we can't live with contradictions. We only think in terms of this or that. That's one problem. Harsha Prabhu, what do you say? Maybe you may not be satisfied. You may have some more thoughts, and I may not have the answer for it. But you can please tell me.
No, I mean, kind of covered. I mean, from the essence of it is what we see here or what we experience here will change our mindset. I mean, will change our desire completely.
Yes, yes,
That is okay.
yes. Any other thoughts, comments? Ahila Mani, you have any comments? Anything that you liked, or maybe you have a question or something you didn't like? Can you?
Hare Krishna, I already put it in the chat box. What you
Chat
have
box. Okay. Oh, chat box. Where is this chat?
already put it over there.
I'm not able to see in this here.
So Prabhu, it reads a good explanation. We face this situation every day in our office life. Thank you. I will try to improve.
Oh, Krishna. Okay. Thank you. Any other thought or comment? Here there is chat.
Prabhu, if time permits, I have one question. I might sound a little
Sure.
absurd in that. But in the last slide, you were explaining about the path of, a Gyani or a Bhakti. How does
Yes, this is the Karmi. This is the Jnani.
Yeah.
And ours is different. And if we become a proper Bhakta, then our path will be different.
Yes. So also it is mentioned that, you mentioned about Dhruva Maharaj, right? So how do we understand that if one is taken by Vishnu, like supposedly a person is there, and the person is chanting the rounds or worshipping the Krishna, worshipping Krishna. So it is a very common thing across all the Hinduism that the Pitru Paksh, the Pitru
Yeah.
offering is being done every year.
Yes. Yes.
Even though the person has been chanting, and at everyone's life, we will face this, that someday or the other, it has to happen, right? Eventually that has to happen. So how do we apply? Because I always have this question: how do we apply this, and is this really to be performed? Or
Very nice question. Very
so
nice question. So the question of Gaurav Prabhu is this whole Shraddha ceremony, where like when a person passes away, what do they do in the Shraddha? So both my father and mother have passed away, done it for them. So I know what it is about, at least from the Vedic scriptural perspective. So what they do is there is the ceremonies for the first 12 days or 13 days. And then there is a ceremonies monthly basis, etc. So when a person dies, he is called according to the Veda. So this is the path of karmi. Let me just explain it a little bit more. I hope it's not too late. Shweta Mataji, is it getting too late for you?
No, it's okay. Please carry on. It's interesting.
Okay. Okay. Harsha Prabhu, you're okay, right, with this? And Ramesh Anna?
Yes, Prabhu.
Okay. Okay. So when a person passes away, after he passes away, he is present still with his subtle body, which is the soul, along with his mind, intelligence, and false ego. It is only the body that he has left. He has left that body. Some cases, the person stays near that body or in his family. If he's too attached to his family, he stays there. In some cases, his journey begins. It can begin, it may take some time to move. That is case by case basis. But then what the Vedic rituals do is, as soon as a person leaves, he is called as a preta. When he or she. The soul is called as a preta because when somebody doesn't have a body, they are called as a preta. Then the ceremonies that are done are from that day of death, the second day or onwards or so, is right on the day of death, the person's body is cremated. The next day, his ashes are taken, and the ceremony that before the ashes are taken, there's a ceremony which is done, which is your body came from earth, water, fire, air, ether. Oh, particular soul. Now I am giving this earth element back to the earth, the fire element back to the fire. Everything is gone. Now you are just a preta. That is that aspect that is happening, which is some people are too attached to their bodies and they cannot let go of the fact that, hey, I suddenly lost my body. So it's a state of shock for them. More so for people who die in an accident or some natural calamity, something which happens suddenly. For somebody who becomes old and who's been waiting for death, usually this doesn't happen. But like somebody who dies younger, they are too attached to the body, so that this ceremony is to help the soul understand your body is gone. Now what do you have? You are just a preta. So that is the second day when we go to a river nearby, or Ganga or Yamuna. If you're rich enough to have a chartered flight and go, that's a different thing. And immerse the ashes. Now, from that second day onwards comes that this person who has been eating, sleeping, and doing all that stuff, he still has that habit in him or her that, hey, I need this time to eat. I need food to eat. He doesn't have a body. It is the body which needs the food. But the perception of the food is in the mind. So therefore, the person who will start feeling hungry, and therefore from the second day onwards, ideally, all the way up to the 9th or 10th day, they will take care of the food by offering some food to the Supreme Lord, and then this food goes to him. That is the food for the preta. And during this time, if the person has committed a lot of sinful activities, he will, this loka of the Pitras is very near to the Yamaloka, and the Yamaloka is very near the Patala Loka. And the Patala Loka is at the bottom of this material creation, so to say. So there will be a journey, and on this journey, he gets food on the basis of the offerings given by his descendants, son, grandson, or whoever it is who's doing that. At that time, so I'm just explaining the process, Gaurav Prabhu, just so that you can be more convinced and understand the process carefully. At the 10th day or so, I think I'm forgetting the date, it is the 10th day or the 11th day, this Preta is then given a body in the Pitraloka. And after he becomes, then from that time onwards, he's no longer called as a Preta, but he's called as a Pitra. And typically what they do is, they safely assume, the Vedic mantras safely assume that 3 generations of folks will be there in the Pitraloka. And whenever this third person comes, the fourth person, like say the father, grandfather, and great-grandfather will be there in the Pitraloka. When the father comes, great-great-grandfather moves out and he goes to this Chandraloka. And from this Chandraloka, he exhausts his pious credits. But then it is not that everybody has to stay for that much time, etc. It all depends on one's karmic reactions and on one's desires. This Pitri Loka is especially for people who have been very much attached to working like a dog, hog, ass in this world, who couldn't think of anything more. That is a karmi who thinks that I, by dint of my effort, will accomplish everything. So why have the Vedic scriptures given this? Or what is the alternate to it? The alternate path is the one where one doesn't go to the Pitraloka at all and one goes directly to Vishnu Loka. The point why the Vedic hymns have given this is, we are very good actors, most of us. We act as if we are great devotees, but in our mind, we are all, whatever we are. Our desires are something, in closed doors, we are something, when we come outside, we are something else. So as a safe path for a person, the Vedic scriptures give this particular path. And here, the particular thing that's happening in the rituals that happen here is, by dint of the Vedic mantras, pious credits are added to this person. And basically by the performer of the Homa and the Yajna. So they pray and say, may he get a better body, etc. And so let him go from the Pitraloka to this Chandraloka. And then when he can go either to Chandraloka, or if his credits are too good, he can go to the Devaloka too. And in a Devaloka, when a person's time gets over, at that time, in Devaloka, there is no disease. In the Devaloka, there is no old age. But when suddenly he has to leave his body, he's just yanked off from his body. At that time, he cries, oh my God, I'm losing this opportunity to enjoy in this Devaloka with all these apsaras, etc. And when he cries, at that time, through the tear, the soul comes. And through this tear is which it gets mixed with the water in the atmosphere and comes as rain. From this rain gets into the soil and this nourishes the grain. Through that grain, the soul enters the grain, and then when we eat the grain, the soul enters the body of the man. And from the body of the man, the soul enters through the semen into the body of the woman. And that's how we are born again. This cycle just continues. The point here is, this entire Vedic mantra sacrifices that are done are to extend the pious credits of the individual so that he at least gets a birth in a human form later to continue his spiritual pursuits. Now, there is also in the Vaishnava Sampradaya, there is a different ritual there, where instead of asking him to go to the Pitraloka, the priests and the descendants chant the Bhagavatam and chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra and pray to the Supreme Lord through a yajna. May he get more devotional credits. And through these devotional credits, he will be maybe again, if the person has not completed his life, he has not developed pure love of Godhead, he will be again born in a very favorable circumstance. So the mantras there are different. The mantras which the devotees use is different. The mantras which the Vedic scholars use is different. So two different paths. And if a person has really accomplished it, like some great sage, what we do is we actually do samadhi. We don't even burn the body. We take the body because even the body becomes purified. Like for example, near Karnataka, there is a famous sage. There's a place called Mantralaya, where there's a very famous sage called Raghavendra Swami. And Raghavendra Swami Samadhi is there in Mantralaya. He said, I'm present personally. He personally went into a Samadhi. He just sat there and he said, okay, put stones around me and close it. No air, nothing. I can live. There are that kind of Samadhis there. And we also have Srila Prabhupada's Samadhi in Vrindavan, where he passed away, but his body had become purified. And therefore, Srila Prabhupada is now living forever by his instructions. So that's a different, so for people like Srila Prabhupada, we don't do any of these tarpana ceremonies at all. So for somebody who has not perfected their life, we can do the ceremonies for the pitras, if that person really does not have any inkling or an idea about spiritual life, or we can help him go to the spiritual life. If a person has been chanting in his life, we can help him to get the next devotional body by an alternate series of mantras. And that alternate series of mantras, you don't go through this Pitraloka at all. So this is where this Jnani thing that comes here, right? This deity of the ear, air, etc., Brahman, it takes to Brahman. It's a very similar path where it comes to another devotee's body. It doesn't go to Brahman because the person is not qualified as yet, but that's another path. Does this satisfy you, Gaurav Prabhu? No, or is there some confusion?
No, Prabhu. Nice explanation. So 2 points which I had, you have covered it. Yes.
Okay.
But I'll probably discuss more in detail with you.
Oh, sure.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Yes,
Just
Prabhu.
what you discussed, some 2 questions here. Where is this? You showed this Pitraloka and everything. Where is the Yamaloka, or the meeting of the soul with the Yama? Or that comes into picture? Number 1 question. Number 2 question. In this Bhagavad Gita, some shloka comes, no, that yam yapi, whomsoever person thinks of, he gets to him. So there Krishna says that those who think of Pitra, they go to Pitraloka.
Yes.
So, but what if the Pitra is like a pure devotee and he's in Krishna Loka?
Okay. Yeah.
2 questions.
Okay. So your first question, where is Yamalok? Yamalok is in...
Not Yamaloka, meeting of the soul to the Yama.
So that happens in Yamaloka, and Yamaloka is in Naraka. So this...
So in the cycle, where is that Yamaloka?
So in the cycle, it is prior to going to Pitraloka is, I missed saying that part of the journey from the first day after the passing away of the soul to the 12th day is the person also goes through Naraka. And if he has done some impious activities, which is almost most of us. So in Naraka, he has to experience without a body, just with his mind, and he has to experience it. And so the ceremonies are such that, yes, if you are going through there, let me give you water. You are going, there is a journey through the Naraka where the soul is stretched. I mean, he's given a feeling that chains are bound on him by the Yamadutas, and he goes through a vast desert. He has no water to drink. So if he's going through that phase, then the descendants offer water to him every day so that he gets some water to drink. He gets some food here. We pray to him, and he gets a food while he's passing through this Narakaloka. All this happens prior to I think it's a 10th or the 11th day. Pardon me for that, I'm forgetting that number. So after this comes the Pitraloka in the sequence. Okay,
bro. And the second question?
Yes, and the second question is, what if we are only thinking about a pure devotee? Whether the pure devotee is it depends on how we are thinking. If we are thinking in terms as a relative, that is one way. But if you're appreciating that pure devotee relative, like say you become a pure devotee and your son is appreciating that, ostensibly he will be obtaining a position where he can come and serve his pure devotee father in some other place. Krishna takes care of that. But Krishna says, this is a nice thing that that actually came, that I heard from my spiritual master. I asked my spiritual master, I don't know who Krishna is. I don't know who Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is. I mean, I have a theoretical understanding, but I don't know much beyond that. I probably don't know all the acharyas in our lineage also. Neither do I know Srila Prabhupada. All I know is only you, and I can relate only to you. So Krishna is asking us to focus on the Supreme Lord, on him, but I can't. You are the only relatable person. What happens if I just relate to you? And can I not just keep that as a focus? And he replied, that's nice, but if you look at it carefully, what is the instruction of the spiritual master? Or who is the spiritual master? The spiritual master is none other than Lord Nityananda. Lord Nityananda's expansion meaning the desire of Lord Nityananda is what the spiritual master manifests. So if you're really attached to me, you should be attached to the instruction of Lord Nityananda. And what does Lord Nityananda want? Lord Nityananda wants that the devotees go to Gauranga Mahaprabhu. And what does Gauranga Mahaprabhu want? Mahaprabhu wants us to focus on Krishna. So if we are really, so the function of an acharya is to actually direct the attention of the bhakta on Krishna. It is not on himself. So likewise, we know that our spiritual master wants us to go to Krishna. And therefore, we know that Krishna is complete with his devotees. Our acharyas are present along with Krishna. It is not that if we focus on pure devotee, Krishna is not present. Krishna is present with his cows, with Radharani, with his flute, with the trees, with Vrindavan, and with our acharyas, and with the pure devotees. So therefore, by accessing Krishna, everybody is in. So if our focus is on the pure devotee to the Supreme Lord, then Krishna will take him to Krishna Loka. Okay?
Yes, got it, true. Got it. Thank you.
Okay, 9:53. It's almost 2 hours. Sorry, I took a lot of your time on Sunday. We'll continue with the 9th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita next week. In the following week, in the morning session, I'm thinking that maybe Kumarika Mataji will lead just for 1 week, maybe. Kumarika Mataji would lead the explanation of the verse. I'll also be present just for a week here. Any thoughts on this from all of you? Would you be okay? You would prefer something different? Harsha Prabhu, Ahila Mani, Shweta Mataji.
No problem.
It's okay. It's fine.
Okay, fine. Okay, sure. Thank you very much. Prabhupada ki jai.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Krishna.
Hare Krishna.